A Game of Solitaire, written by C. Scott Marcano. Chapter 2. Game Knows Game. Caught in the blinding glare of the headlights, trapped in front of a private residence I had no business being at, I could only stand and wait while the dark figure, whom I presumed was Chip, studied me in silence for several tense moments. What is he doing? I wondered to myself. Was he debating on the best place to dump my body? Finally, I saw the shadowy form step out from behind the veil of the high beam's luminance. I still couldn't see him clearly as my eyes hadn't adjusted. I decided that my best option would be to feign confidence. After all, when predators sense weakness in their prey, they tend to pounce instantly. "Chip," I called out, trying to make my voice sound deep. An unfamiliar, puzzled voice answered back in Spanish. "Mande?" I knew immediately the voice didn't belong to Chip. I'd know his distinct southern drawl anywhere. I squinted and peered hard at the silhouetted figure standing before me. Gradually, the man's details came into view. He was a thin, nervous-looking, middle-aged Latino dude, dressed in a nice suit. A trim mustache decorated his upper lip. Beads of sweat covered his forehead. His soft brown eyes darted back and forth. He looked more scared than I was. "¿Quién he asked cautiously. "Mi nombre es Des," I replied in an embarrassingly bad gringo accent. Although my family originally came from Venezuela, my grandfather had emigrated to the English-speaking island of Trinidad while still a teenager. His wife, my mixed-race grandmother, Celeste, was a Trini, 2 generations deep. As a result, no one in my family spoke our original tongue, just English. My Spanish came from high school and college classes mainly, and also an epic year traveling through Central and South America with a friend of mine. I wasn't fluent, mind you, but I could communicate well enough to be understood. "I'm sorry, man, I didn't mean to trespass," I said in a reassuring voice, trying to break the tension of the moment. "My grandmother supposedly owns this house. I haven't spoken to her in a while. Her name is Inga." The man's expression suddenly gave way to a look of surprised recognition. "I met her. Your grandmother?" the Latino man said. "She speaks with a strange accent, no?" See, I said excitedly. "That's her. Is she around? When did you last see her?" "A year ago. I met her when I came to look at the house before I bought it. After that, no. The bank handled everything." Wow, I thought to myself, my grandmother did own this house. I had so many questions, but I just had one more for this wary-looking homeowner. Was another man with her? Mid-40s, tall, white, blonde hair, blue eyes? The Latino man nodded immediately. "I saw a man like that about a month ago. He came by to pick up some old mail. He told me he used to live here with the old woman." A chill went down my spine, as I suspected. Chip was still lurking around. I decided that now would be a good time to bounce before this encounter got any weirder. I apologized to the homeowner again for trespassing and thanked him for the information he'd given me. Then I began the long walk back up the circuitous driveway to my car. I drove for over an hour before my pulse finally returned to normal. Even though I'd gained some valuable information, the entire episode shook the hell out of me. How could I have been so reckless and stupid? I went into a dangerous situation with no real plan or preparation. Luckily, it had just been some harmless old dude who'd come along. But what if it had been Chip? Maybe I'd be in the trunk of his car by now. The thought occurred to me that perhaps the events of this evening were a bad omen. I mean, what were the odds that the owner would pull up right then, when I had nowhere to run? Perhaps the universe was sending me a message, a shot across the bow, if you will, to stop this amateur investigation before I got hurt. "You got some balls, bro," Big D said with a smirk. "That's exactly the kind of stupid, reckless shit I would have done. I'm proud of you." "I'm not proud," I replied glumly, my voice full of self-loathing. "I'm such an idiot. I could have gotten myself killed." "Don't bash yourself, man. You ain't stupid. You just don't know jack shit. There's a difference. That's why Big D's here to help, so you don't get your dumb ass killed." It was the next day. I hadn't gotten back to my apartment until 4 a.m. I had slept just a few hours before my pesky cat, Rude Boy, woke me up in his usual, relentlessly annoying manner, pawing my face relentlessly until I threw up the white flag. After I fed the little beast, I pounded coffee and went to work on Skid Row. Now I was sitting in a private visiting room in the Los Angeles County Men's Jail, the infamous multi-story facility known as the City of Courts. The man sitting across the polished stainless steel table from me was Harvey Diamond, or Big D, as he was known around his South Central neighborhood. He was a big, burly man with sharp eyes and a handsome, round face that always seemed to have a bemused expression. Unlike other visiting rooms at the detention center, this one wasn't bugged by the sheriffs because it was used by attorneys and their clients. Big D and I could talk freely in there. I wasn't his attorney, by the way, although Big D often insisted I was. I had been granted access to this room by virtue of being part of Big D's so-called legal team, which consisted of my boss, private investigator Billy Rose, and Harvey's overworked and underpaid public defender Cynthia Lamont. Officially, my role was to write a sentencing report on Big D's behalf, but thanks to his relentless scheming, my duties on this case, well, they kind of evolved. I'd gotten the job at Rose Investigations through Ron Choi, the father of a high school friend whom I'd run into by chance on the street one day. Ron was a diehard progressive. He worked as a defense attorney, but in his spare time, he promoted a community activist organization he started called Save LA. He shared an office downtown with his best friend, a private investigator named Billy Rose. It must have been fate running into Ron because I was dead broke at the time and Billy Rose just happened to be looking for a writer to hire. At first glance, Billy didn't look much like a PI, at least not the kind you see in movies and TV. He was a slightly built, nebbishy man who dressed like a used car salesman and had the friendly demeanor of an affable Boy Scout troop leader rather than a gritty PI working out of a Skid Row office. He sported a cheesy mustache that gave him a vague resemblance to the actor William H. Macy in Boogie Nights. But Billy had mastered the art of playing the fool without actually being one. When it came to the streets, Billy knew his business. He'd worked in the shadows for some of the biggest criminal lawyers in LA. His specialty was being a bottom feeder, taking on small cases for poor clients and then occasionally happening upon a dead whale carcass when a big attorney had a dirty little job they wanted handled discreetly. Billy had originally hired me to write sentencing reports. These lengthy documents were biographies of defendants intended to get the judge to take a few years off a sentence. They included personal letters to the court written by family and friends, along with a detailed narrative of the defendant's often troubled life and any extenuating circumstances that the court should consider. The reports were actually quite effective, especially in state cases, but federal courts were an entirely different beast, as Big D was about to find out. Harvey Diamond, aka Big D, was a petty career thief and con man. He had a criminal file that was thicker than an unabridged version of War and Peace. It was all small-time bullshit, nothing involving violence, shoplifting, opportunity robberies, writing bad checks, and countless con games and Ponzi schemes. See, Big D was very clever. Too clever. He used charm and guile rather than muscle to get what he wanted, most of the time. His life of crime began when he was 14 and he started running drugs as a member of the Bloods. It was understandable that Big D fell into a situation like that, given he'd never had a real family. His father was unknown, and his mother was a prostitute who was too far gone with her heroin addiction to care for him. Big D had grown up bouncing from one foster home to another until he finally fell in with local gangs and wound up in juvie, where his real education began. The real tragedy of Big D's life was that he was actually incredibly intelligent, hardworking, and charismatic. He was a natural-born leader who could, as they say, sell ketchup popsicles to nurses wearing white linen uniforms on a hot summer day in Texas. I always wondered what Big D's life would have been like had he been born on a different side of town. With his brains and gift of gab, he might have gone very far in life. Instead, he wound up a small-time street hustler whose greatest claim to fame was founding the Rolling 60s. Who the hell are they, do you ask? As Billy enthusiastically recounted to me. They were a bunch of crazy-ass teenagers from the hood that Harvey organized into a first-class smash-and-grab outfit that terrorized Beverly Hills jewelry stores. That's how I met Big D. He was my first client. The Rolling 60s had a simple but brilliant criminal strategy, according to Billy. They'd saunter into a fancy jewelry store on Rodeo or Roxbury. They'd be a group, about 5 or 6 of them, all wearing hoodies. Once they were all in, they'd whip out hammers and crowbars and smash the glass display cases and grab as much loot as they could snatch in exactly 1 minute's time. Then before a patrol car could arrive, they'd haul ass into different waiting cars. Big D's genius move was to instruct the getaway drivers to head west rather than east. They'd avoid the freeways and drive slowly on surface streets out to Santa Monica or Malibu. Fucking brilliant! Billy exclaimed in admiration. Apparently, this technique had thrown the cops completely off, as the authorities assumed the African-American perps would head straight back to South Central in making their getaway. Eventually, however, Big D's inspired scheme broke down. It worked like a charm. Until D got too greedy, as always, Billy said, shaking his head. After an 8-month crime spree, the cops got wise to the gang and started staking out the jewelry stores in Beverly Hills. They managed to trail one of Big D's teams back to the parking lot of the Santa Monica Pier. They nabbed the Beach Boys, Billy quipped. It didn't take much time for them to roll over on the rest of the gang, and that was it. The rollers were gone, faster than a toupee in a hurricane. Big D should have gotten at least a 10-year stretch in state prison for that caper, but with Billy's help, he served only 3 years. The rollers were really something, though, Billy would say wistfully with a touch of nostalgia in his voice, as if he was describing a great Dodger baseball team from the past. Indeed, Billy had a huge sentimental soft spot for Big D, which explained why he took on his latest case for free. Big D had promised to pay Billy back by passing his business card around the men's jail to help him drum up clients. But I don't think Billy really took the offer seriously. Big D needed help. That's all that mattered. The latest case was pretty serious, if not insurmountable. It all began as a fairly modest scam. Big D and an accomplice, Dre Johnson, had stolen a high-end color scanner printer from an unlocked Best Buy delivery truck. The enterprising pair had them use the device to make high-def color copies of a dozen stolen $100 American Express traveler's checks, which they then turned around and sold for around $5 a pop. On the surface, it doesn't sound like a very profitable scam, but if nothing else, Big D was industrious. I kept that bitch going night and day, dog, Big D told me, chuckling. I had a line outside my door going round the motherfucking block all the way to the Watts Towers. The low-grade counterfeiting enterprise lasted only a few months before D's partner, Dre, got pulled over for a broken taillight, and the cops spotted stacks of Amex traveler's checks sitting on the backseat of his car. They also found a couple of grams of coke in his pocket. The DA's office wanted to give Dre 2 years for the coke, but when the feds got wind of it, everything changed in a hurry. See, as fate would have it, American Express had gotten really pissed off about these scams, which collectively were starting to have a notable impact on their bottom line. Big D's antics caught their ire particularly because his batches of bogus traveler's checks had been sold and resold many times until they turned up in all 50 states. American Express wanted to make an example of Big D in order to teach other low-grade con men an important lesson. You don't fuck with Amex. To this end, they pressured the federal prosecutors to go after Big D hard. To get to him, the feds leaned on Dre, telling him that in exchange for ratting on Big D and lying about the extent of their small operation, his coke charge would be dismissed. So Dre had 2 choices: serve 2 years in state prison or go home in a couple of weeks. Unsurprisingly, Dre opted for the latter. With Dre's testimony in hand, the feds had Big D by the chicken tenders. Even though D had only made a couple of $1,000s off the scheme, federal sentencing law held that length of sentences could be greatly enhanced by the amount of damage suffered by the victim. In this case, American Express estimated their total losses were over $5 million. As a result, Big D was facing a 50-year sentence in federal prison. "They're going to bury my black ass, Des," Big D said grimly during our first interview. For a guy who was pretty unflappable, he looked absolutely terrified. It was just the 2 of us in the attorney conference room that day, since Billy Rose was too busy working on paying cases, and D's public defender, Cynthia Lamont, was sick to death of him and didn't want to bother interviewing him. To be fair, she'd defended Big D dozens of times over the years. She knew all too well how incorrigible he was. Neither Billy nor Lamont thought Big D had a hope in hell of beating the rap. "Can I ask you a personal question, bro?" Big D queried as he sized me up with his street-smart eyes. "What race are you?" "I don't know. I got a bunch in me," I replied. "Would one of them happen to be black?" Harvey inquired, looking hopeful. "Yeah, why?" "'Cause I need you to dig deep and find your Negro soul, brother," Big D said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm staring into the bottomless pit here. You're the only hope I've got. I know I've been a scandalous motherfucker most of my life, lying, cheating, stealing, pulling cons, but I never killed anyone. I never beat or raped a woman. I never hurt no little kids. I copied some stupid checks, that's all." Big D paused and looked at me with a pleading, sad expression on his face. I don't want to die in prison, bro. Getting the shit kicked out of me every day by some young punk from my commissary, till one day I curl up in my bunk and croak from cancer. That's no way for a man to go out, locked in a cage, like a motherfucking slave. You seem like a smart guy, Des. I need you on my team, dog. Please, I'm begging you, help a brother out. Be my nigga. I knew, of course, that Big D was appealing to my sense of racial solidarity, in part to manipulate me. Even so, he had a point. The government was trying to lock him up and throw away the key over a relatively minor criminal act, as they'd done with so many black and Latino men in this country. It was fucking shameless. His use of the N-word was interesting, though. Although it's not a word which is part of my normal vernacular, in this context, I took no offense to it at all, as it was obviously meant to express camaraderie, not self-loathing or hatred. I must admit being called the N-word by Big D struck a particular chord in me. It invoked powerful emotions that had been gnawing at my heart for some time. A sense of displacement from mainstream white culture and an urgent desire to better understand who I was as a mixed-race person. However, there was also a more immediate and practical reason to assist Big D, which I'll explain in a moment. After deliberating the situation, I finally spoke. Okay, Big D, I'll be your nigga, but there's something you gotta do for me. What I wanted from Big D was pretty simple. I needed advice on my mother's case. I wanted another perspective, especially from someone who knew crime and how criminals operated. Big D had an advanced PhD in that department. I told him everything I knew so far, how Chip had shown him after the death of my stepfather, how he had turned my mother against me and my brother and married her in Vegas, how she just moved back to California and how we reconnected with her, only to be heartbroken when she disappeared shortly afterwards and was then found dead a week later, lying next to her wrecked car at the bottom of a canyon near her home in Brawley. That shit sounds ratchet as hell, bro, Big D observed dryly. Know what I think? I think this dude, Chip, he didn't just happen to meet your mother. He set her up as a mark from the start. First he gained her trust. Then he got her hooked on drugs. Then he turned her against you and chased you and your bro off because you were a threat to his gravy train. I showed Big D the police report I'd stumbled upon that detailed how Chip had been involved in a minor car accident near my grandmother's apartment in Escondido. The police thought it looked suspicious, but Chip and his crew had disappeared after the police started asking too many questions. Big D just shook his head. We call that shit the bump and run. You know what? That makes me think. You should try to find out if Chip took a life insurance policy out on your mother before she died. Big D leaned in close and spoke in a conspiratorial manner. See? Most guys aren't as multi-talented as me. Crooks tend to stick to the playbook they know. Shoplifters stick to snatching. Dealers stick to dealing. Now, if insurance fraud is this dude's racket, then, well, you know. Harvey paused, trying to spare my feelings, but I was beyond tiptoeing around these issues anymore. You think he killed my mom to collect on a life insurance policy? I asked. Big D nodded affirmatively. How can you be so sure? I pressed. A knowing grin spread across D's face. Trust me, brother. Game knows game. Harvey wants me to do what? Cynthia Lamont, Big D's public defender, cried in an exasperated voice on the other end of the phone. She was on speaker talking to me and Billy Rose in his cluttered office. He wants you to file a motion of discovery and demand the feds produce every single police report connected to the case, I explained. Are you fucking crazy? I'm not doing that, Lamont said angrily. Why not, Cynthia? Billy inquired innocently. Because I got 50 goddamn open cases sitting on my desk. I don't have time for Harvey Diamond's stupid bullshit anymore. At this point, Lamont started coughing loudly. The topic was clearly upsetting her. After she finished coughing, she apologized and said she needed a glass of water. When she got her voice back, she continued, Look, I'm sorry, guys. I didn't mean to go off on you. I'm just having a bad day, okay? Lamont let out another loud cough. I signaled Billy to let me speak. No worries, Miss Lamont, I said. I understand your frustration completely. Big D's a handful, we get it. But just hear me out. I think we've come up with a good plan. There was a long pause. Go on, Lamont finally said. I'm listening. Okay, Well, there's literally thousands of checks the FBI says are connected to Big D. But the thing is, the feds haven't actually presented any of them as evidence in court. Harvey has a right to examine the evidence before the sentencing hearing, right? Lamont exhaled loudly. In theory, yes, but so what? They don't have to present every check in court. They have the serial numbers of the counterfeit checks which match the original ones he copied. Well, some do, but many probably don't, because Big D couldn't have possibly made all the ones that Amex is claiming he's responsible for. Who cares, Lamont retorted. There's still enough that probably do match to give Harvey 30 years in prison. If I file a motion of discovery and demand the feds produce every single police report, it won't change anything. It will just chew up months of their time while they go fetch them. Exactly, Big D said excitedly the day before when I had made the same point. It will eat up months of their time. He winked at me. I still didn't get it. Big D exhaled and spoke slowly, as if he was explaining how ice cream is made to a small child. See? It ain't about proving anything, bro. It's about squeezing that bitch nigga's balls upstairs. Big D was referring to his ex-partner turned snitch, Dre Johnson. As fate would have it, Dre was also being held at the men's jail while he awaited release, which would happen right after Big D was sentenced. In fact, he was being held on the floor right above Big D's cell block in a special unit that inmates called the Cheese Factory because that's where all the rats hung out. See, the key to the government's whole case against me is riding on Dre's testimony. That's all they got to prove I was the mastermind behind it all. If Dre recants, then they ain't got shit. All they can charge me for is 50 bum checks they found in my house. Dre's not going to recant, D, I observed soberly. They gave him a great deal. He's going to walk out of jail in a couple of days. Big D smiled and leaned in close with a twinkle in his eyes. Except the punk bitch can't leave until they sentence me, and they can't do that until they produced every motherfucking police report. See what I'm getting at? So what we're gonna do is make that rat rot up there in the cheese factory for as long as we can, waiting, wondering. After a while, he's gonna start to panic. Meanwhile, I'm gonna motivate him by having some of my homies spread a rumor that I paid a soldado from MS-13 to put a shiv up his ass. Dre's a pussy. A couple of weeks with the heat turned up and that snitch bitch is going to forget he ever met me. Sounds like a good plan, but that's part about knifing him. That's just a bluff, right? I asked nervously. Of course, Des, Big D said, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. That's not Big D's style. But to be perfectly honest, I wasn't so sure. Back in Billy's office the next day, Lamont said nothing for a few moments after I explained the whole gamut. Finally, she sighed and said, "Fine, fuck it. But you're doing most of the legwork on this one, Billy." As this drama was playing out, Big D surprised me one day by asking if I had a copy of the coroner's report regarding my mother's death. He explained that there was a doctor in a nearby cell who'd been busted for selling opioids on the sly. Big D had gotten to be pals with him and talked him into agreeing to take a look at the report for me in exchange for some undisclosed favor. "It wouldn't hurt to get a second opinion, dog," Harvey suggested. "You never know." I brought a copy of the report with me the next day. It was inside a sealed manila envelope. I'd ordered it from the coroner's office, but had never actually opened it up and read it. It was too painful. My mother's body had been battered in a violent car wreck. She'd been thrown through the windshield on impact. Her body had lain in the desert, exposed to the elements for days. I knew there were several photos of it. I just couldn't bear to look at it. A few days later, Harvey handed the report back to me. "The doc says it looks like a setup," Harvey said grimly. "He said your mom's injuries are consistent with a car wreck. Something about the way her ribs were broke not being kosher." He wrote a note explaining it all. "I put it in the envelope for you." "Thanks," I said in a soft voice as I took the manila envelope back from Big D. I reached inside and read over the note. The jailed doctor wrote a brief explanation that he believed my mom had injuries to her rib cage that appeared to have come before the accident. It was a stunning revelation, but it was nothing that I could take to the police. Who would take the word of a disgraced doctor who just got busted for selling OxyContin? But it was another significant piece of circumstantial evidence for me to ponder over as I lay awake at night. The government's refusal to acquiesce to the reasonable discovery requests of the defendant because it finds abiding by the Constitution inconvenient amounts to a shameless and willful attempt to circumvent the basic rights of due process of afforded every citizen of this country under the law. You're goddamn right it does, Big D roared as he read aloud from the legal pleading I'd written on his behalf. This shit is dope. You're a fuck of a writer, dog. I wish I had you for my lawyer 20 years ago. I'm not a lawyer, D, I remind him gently, but Big D just shook his head. Yes, you are. You just don't know it yet. It was kind of true. I'd taken over writing all the legal pleadings from Ms. Lamont because she had developed a chronic case of the flu that had knocked her out of action for the last several weeks. That bitch ain't sick, Big D said dismissively. She just doesn't want to get off her lazy ass and help a brother out. She's still mad at me for that party. Big D was referring to an infamous incident on the last case Lamont defended him on. In that case, Big D had stolen some toilets from Home Depot. Lamont had worked her butt off to get the trial judge to grant bail to him. But Big D, being, well, Big D, had blown it. Once he'd gotten back home, he'd thrown a huge party with his buddies to celebrate his newfound freedom. Soon, strippers had shown up and lots of blow was passed around, and in no time, the whole thing had gotten completely out of control. Fights broke out. It turned into a mini riot. The cops finally showed up and arrested Big D for violating the terms of his bail. Can you blame her for being sick of you after that? I asked him. No, not really, Big D said, chuckling with a shrug. It took several weeks of back-and-forth argument before the judge ordered the feds to produce over 200 individual police reports from around the country. Amex and the federal prosecutors weren't happy about it, to say the least. But they had to comply. As Big D had predicted, his stratagem worked out brilliantly. After a few months of waiting around in the cheese factory, the paranoid snitch, Dre, got tired of worrying about being shivved in the back by D's phantom MS-13 assassin and recanted his entire testimony. He was sent to Chino to serve out the remaining year and a half of his sentence. The judge gave Big D 3 years for the checks found in his possession, which, all things considered, was an amazing victory. This brings us back to where we began. It was the day after I found out about my grandmother's secret house. I was here to say goodbye to Big D. He was leaving the next day for the Supermax in Colorado. After I filled him in about what went down the night before, I had to share some sad news I just learned on the way over from Billy Rose. Cynthia Lamont is dead, I informed him sadly. It turns out she had lung cancer the whole time she was defending you, D. That's why she was out sick so much. She was in chemo. Harvey looked completely shook by the revelation. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared off into outer space. I know I talked a lot of shit about her, Des, he finally said in a somber voice, but I didn't mean it. Deep down, I always respected Lamont. She was a good woman. She had a thankless job, defending all us broke-ass, shameless bastards. God bless her soul. Amen, I said. Big D looked at me. His expression was solemn, concerned. I'd never seen him so serious like this before. You need to handle this business with your mom, dog. You know what I'm saying? I ain't telling you what to do. Hell, I wasn't ever tight with my mama, but still I loved her. And if this shit happened to my mama, I'd do right by her, one way or another. Just then, a sheriff's deputy came by and tapped on the glass window. Our time was up. Big D stood up and suddenly threw his arms around me, embracing me in a huge bear hug. Thank you for everything, bro, he said warmly as he crushed my ribs. You're welcome, man. As the deputy led Big D away, I wondered quietly to myself if he did indeed finally learn his lesson. Would he really change, or would he die in prison? There was no way to tell. All I could do was pray for him. A few days later, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I said to the unknown caller. This Des? The dude who helped Big D? Yeah? Who is this? I replied. Siobhan, I'm a friend of D's. I got something for you. Some gifts. Big D told me to call you and make sure you got it. Can you come meet me over at the farmer's market in like 2 hours, near the Cajun place? Sure, I said, a little surprised. I live down the block. Great, see you there. You'll recognize me. Just look for a girl with fabulous hair. She hung up. 2 hours later, I spotted Siobhan sitting alone at a table in front of the Cajun food joint. Her hair was indeed fabulous. It was long and braided, dyed bright red and yellow. It looked like a neon snow cone. She was a beautiful African-American woman in her mid-20s. She wore a brand new designer outfit, and her ears, neck, and wrists were adorned with gold. As I approached, Siobhan stopped texting someone on her phone and looked up at me. Des? The one and only. She gestured to an open seat in front of her. At her feet was a large gym bag that was zipped up at the top. After a few moments of casual get-to-know-you conversation, Siobhan discreetly slid the gym bag over to me with her foot. Big D wanted you to have this. He's so grateful for everything you did for him. Oh, wow. A killer gym bag. How thoughtful, I said sincerely. Siobhan rolled her eyes at me. The gift's in the bag, dummy. Oh, right, I replied, trying to act like I knew that all along. I picked up the gym bag and set it down on the table. I started to open it, but Siobhan quickly reached across the table and stopped my hand. Not here. With that, she snatched up her phone and sauntered away. I got up from the table and started walking home, carrying the mysterious gym bag on my shoulder. I intended to look at what was inside when I got home, but as I approached my apartment, temptation got the better of me. I stopped a block from my building and set the bag down on the sidewalk. I started to unzip it. Right at that moment, however, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a friendly neighbor approaching. His name was Abraham, Orthodox Jewish man who lived in the duplex next door. Abe was a tailor who owned a small shop on Fairfax. Probably because I always greeted him with a friendly shalom whenever we passed by one another, Abe assumed I was a member of the tribe. Because of this, he always made a point of inviting me to come to temple with him. I didn't have the heart to tell him I wasn't Jewish. As Abe ambled towards me, I peered inside the gym bag. It was stuffed with expensive designer clothes, shirts, pants, and silk ties. Some of the items still had parts of torn plastic hooks and broken coat hangers affixed to them. They'd been stolen right off the rack of a high-end clothing store. Classic D, I muttered to myself. But there was something else in the bag, too. I could feel it in my hand as I thumbed through the stolen duds. It was a small object with hard edges. Curious to see what it might be, I lifted the clothes up and took a gander. My eyes went wide. Laying at the bottom of the gym bag was a .38 Beretta handgun. "Shalom, my friend," Abe suddenly said as he strode up. "Shalom, Abe," I replied as I quickly reburied the gun underneath the pile of fine clothes. I tried to zip up the top of the gym bag as fast as I could, but it was too late. Abe had already caught a glimpse of the stolen merchandise inside. I didn't know if he saw the gun or not. "That's some nice clothes you got there. Been shopping?" he remarked in a Hebrew accented voice that sounded somewhat suspicious. Yeah, sorta," I stammered. "Actually, it's a gift from a friend." "Nice friend," Abe replied with a smirk as he stroked his long gray beard. "But you shouldn't fold up good clothes like that. They'll get wrinkled. If you need any of them altered, bring them to my store. I'll cut you a deal." "For sure," I replied merrily, trying to hide my exploding panic. "Well, I better go hang these up so they don't get wrinkled, you know." I picked up the bag and tucked it tightly under my arm. I could feel the sharp edges of the handgun pressed up against my ribcage. Instead of walking away, Abe stared at me with a curious expression on his face. He looked like he wanted to say something important but couldn't find the right words. "You really need to come to temple," he finally said in a tone that sounded more like a command than a request. "Yes, I will. Soon, Abe, I promise." Abe then dropped his grave expression and patted me on the shoulder in a friendly manner. He turned and walked away, slowly whistling an old Hebrew hymn. I scrambled to my apartment door, unlocked it, and slammed it shut behind me. I ran upstairs and set the bag down on a coffee table. Rude Boy came up and began rubbing my leg. He was hungry. I ignored his pestering and unzipped the gym bag again. I reached inside and carefully removed the gun and set it down gingerly on my wooden coffee table. I stared at it in apprehension and amazement. "Fuck," I muttered to myself. Just then, my phone rang. I picked it up and checked the number. It was my grandmother calling.